Clara Jensen was the kind of mother everyone in Maplewood admired, calm, dependable, and fiercely devoted to her 6-year-old daughter Lila until the night Lila vanished without a trace, exposing a plan so chilling it shattered the town's picture-perfect peace. Maplewood sat quietly at the edge of a wide blue lake, the kind of place where people left their doors unlocked and neighbors waved from across the street without needing a reason. The town's heartbeat was slow and steady, marked by the chime of the church bell at noon and the smell of fresh bread from the bakery on Main Street. Children rode their bikes in small packs, their laughter echoing through tree-lined avenues where every mailbox seemed to belong to a friend. Visitors often said Maplewood felt like stepping back in time, a slice of life that had escaped the chaos of the outside world. Among the neat rows of white picket fences stood a modest yellow house on Pine Street, home to 32-year-old Clara Jensen and her 6-year-old daughter, Lila. From the outside, the house looked like something out of a postcard. The porch swing was always clean, the small garden neatly trimmed, and a warm light glowed through the kitchen window each evening. Clara was the kind of mother who made life look effortless. She worked part-time at the town library, where she greeted visitors with a soft smile and seemed to know every child by name. Parents admired her calm nature. She never raised her voice, never seemed flustered, and always had a kind word ready, as if nothing could ever disturb her quiet world. Lila was the sparkle in Clara's carefully ordered life. With her wide brown eyes and a giggle that carried across the yard, she charmed everyone she met. Teachers often said she was unusually bright for her age, drawing animals with surprising detail and asking questions that made adults pause before answering. She loved wearing bright dresses and mismatched socks, claiming it made her run faster. Clara doted on her daughter in ways that seemed almost storybook perfect. Each morning began with homemade pancakes shaped like hearts, and every bedtime ended with a gentle song Clara said her own mother used to sing. To neighbors and friends, Clara's life appeared picture perfect. People often commented that she seemed to have it all together despite raising Lila on her own. Clara rarely spoke about Lila's father, only mentioning that he lived out of state and wasn't part of their lives. Instead, she focused on creating a safe, happy home free from drama and noise. The two were inseparable, often seen walking hand in hand to the park or sitting side by side at the library's reading hour. If anyone had looked closely, they might have noticed the way Clara's eyes lingered on Lila a little too long, as if guarding her from something unseen. But in a town where trust came easily, no one thought to question it. Maplewood was proud of its quiet charm, but quiet towns have a way of hiding their deepest shadows. Behind Clara's warm smile and the tidy rooms of the yellow house, a storm was quietly gathering, one that would soon pull the peaceful community into a mystery no one could have imagined. The calm rhythm of Maplewood broke on a cold October morning when the Jensen house became the center of sudden panic. It began with the sound of Clara's frantic call to 911 at dawn. Her voice, usually soft and measured, carried a sharp edge of terror as she reported that 6-year-old Lila was gone. The operator asked if she might have wandered outside, but Clara insisted she had searched every room, checked the yard, and even looked in closets and under the bed. Lila's small frame, usually curled beneath a pink quilt decorated with tiny stars, was nowhere to be found. When the first police car pulled up to the quiet street, neighbors peered from behind curtains, their breath visible in the chilly morning air. Officers entered the yellow house to find a scene that was as unsettling as it was confusing. The front door was unlocked, but there were no signs of a break-in. No shattered windows, no forced locks. A single pink slipper rested near the hallway as though it had been dropped mid-step. Lila's favorite stuffed rabbit sat upright on her pillow, untouched. It looked less like a crime scene and more like a house frozen in the middle of an ordinary night. Detectives moved quickly, searching every corner while others canvassed the neighborhood. Volunteers formed search lines across nearby woods and along the lake's edge. Helicopters circled overhead as the sun rose, casting long shadows across the quiet town. Flyers with Lila's school photo, brown eyes bright, hair tied back with a blue ribbon, were printed within hours and taped to every lamppost, grocery store door, and coffee shop window. People who had once spent mornings chatting over muffins were now scouring bushes and drain pipes for any sign of a little girl. Clara stood in the driveway wrapped in a gray sweater, her hands trembling despite the blanket and officer draped around her shoulders. Cameras from local news stations arrived by mid-morning, capturing her pale face as she pleaded for anyone with information to come forward. Her words cracked as she begged for Lila's safe return, and her eyes, red from tears, made a powerful image that quickly spread beyond Maplewood. Strangers from nearby towns joined the search, moved by the sight of a mother desperate to find her child. Yet even in those first frantic hours, small details puzzled investigators. The security camera meant to capture the front porch was found unplugged, the cord neatly coiled on a shelf inside the entryway. Clara claimed she hadn't noticed, insisting she never touched the device. A neighbor mentioned hearing what sounded like a car door closing around midnight, but no one had seen any vehicle on the street. The unlocked front door, which Clara swore she had locked before bed, offered no answers. As daylight faded and the search stretched into the night, the town's sense of safety dissolved. Parents clutched their children a little tighter. Porch lights that were once switched off without a thought now glowed through the darkness. The question on everyone's lips spread like a quiet storm: how could a child disappear without leaving a single trace? As the search for Lila stretched into its second week, the comforting image of a mother in distress began to fray at the edges. Detectives who had initially treated Clara as a grieving parent now found themselves revisiting every detail of her story. At first glance, Clara's account of the night seemed simple. She put Lila to bed around 8, read her a story, and checked on her once before she went to sleep. But as investigators compared her statements to phone records, neighbor reports, and surveillance footage, small inconsistencies started to appear like cracks in freshly frozen ice. The first red flag came from the library where Clara worked. Colleagues told police she had been unusually distracted the week before the disappearance, spending long stretches in the staff room texting on her phone. When detectives subpoenaed her records, they discovered several late-night calls to an unfamiliar number registered in another state. The calls were brief but frequent, often lasting only a few minutes and always occurring after Lila was asleep. Clara never mentioned these calls during her interviews. When asked about them later, she claimed they were just a friend, but she refused to give a name. Then came the discovery in the basement. While searching the house again, officers noticed a small storage cabinet that hadn't been opened during the initial sweep. Inside was a neatly packed suitcase filled with Lila's clothes, her favorite bedtime books, a few snacks, and a stack of coloring pages. It was as if someone had carefully prepared for a trip but never left. Clara explained that she was planning a surprise vacation, though she could not produce tickets, reservations, or any evidence of such plans. The explanation felt thin, and investigators quietly marked it as suspicious. Neighbors also began sharing memories that took on new meaning in light of the investigation. A woman who lived across the street recalled seeing Clara's car lights flick on around midnight the night Lila disappeared. Another neighbor reported hearing the soft slam of a car door, though no vehicle was visible from their window. Clara had repeatedly told police she never left the house after putting Lila to bed, a statement that now seemed questionable. The security camera remained one of the most troubling pieces of the puzzle. Technicians confirmed that the porch camera had been unplugged deliberately. The cord was carefully wound and placed on an entryway shelf, a task unlikely to happen by accident. Clara claimed she had no idea it had been disconnected, but detectives struggled to believe such a detail could go unnoticed in a home as meticulously maintained as hers. As these fragments of evidence accumulated, the once sympathetic portrait of a heartbroken mother began to shift. Detectives still lacked a clear motive or a full picture of what had happened, but the weight of unanswered questions pressed harder with each passing day. Clara's quiet composure, once seen as strength, now felt more like a mask hiding something deeper, something Maplewood had never imagined lurking behind the tidy yellow house on Pine Street. The investigation finally broke open with a single piece of footage that had been overlooked during the frantic first days of the search. A state highway camera, positioned miles outside Maplewood, captured Clara's yellow sedan at 1:17 a.m. on the night Lila disappeared. The timestamp showed the car traveling away from town, headlights cutting through the darkness. There was no report of Clara leaving her home that night, and no reason for her to be on that road at such an hour. Detectives, armed with this new lead, traced the route and began checking businesses, gas stations, and roadside cameras along the highway. Slowly, a breadcrumb trail emerged. Clara's car had been spotted again near a wooded area 2 hours away. Officers followed the path to a cluster of remote cabins near a quiet lake known more for fishing trips than overnight guests. The cabins were mostly empty that time of year, their wooden roofs dusted with early frost. The property manager confirmed that a woman matching Clara's description had rented a small unit in cash under a false name 3 days before the disappearance. When detectives knocked on the door of the cabin, their hearts pounded with a mix of fear and hope. Inside, they found Lila sitting cross-legged on the floor, calmly coloring a picture of a deer. She looked up with wide eyes but showed no signs of distress. A half-empty cereal bowl rested on a nearby table, and a pile of toys lay neatly beside a travel bag. Clara emerged from the small bedroom seconds later, her face pale but strangely composed. She did not run, she did not scream. Instead, she raised her hands slightly, as if she had been waiting for this moment all along. Officers quickly secured the scene and took Clara into custody, while a female officer knelt to speak softly to Lila, assuring her that she was safe. Medical staff later confirmed the child was unharmed, well-fed, and cared for during her absence. But the relief of finding Lila alive did little to answer the gnawing question that now hung in the crisp air. Why would a mother take her own child in secret and disappear without a word? At the station, Clara's carefully built facade began to crumble. Faced with the undeniable evidence of her movements, she eventually admitted that she had planned the entire escape. For months, she had been speaking with a man she met through an online forum, a man who lived in another state, and had convinced her that Maplewood was not safe. Clara claimed she believed people in town were watching her and that Lila needed to be removed before something terrible happened. Investigators found no evidence to support her fears. There were no threats, no stalkers, no danger except the one Clara created herself. Her confession stunned even seasoned detectives. What the town had seen as a random kidnapping turned out to be a calculated attempt to start a new life. Clara insisted that she loved her daughter and only wanted to protect her. To the law, however, her actions were a deliberate abduction, carried out with chilling precision under the guise of maternal care. News of Clara's arrest spread through Maplewood like a shockwave, silencing the town that once buzzed with frantic searches and hopeful prayers. The same neighbors who had walked shoulder to shoulder through woods and along lake banks now gathered in hushed clusters outside the courthouse, their faces a mixture of disbelief and quiet anger. People who had offered casseroles and comfort to a grieving mother now struggled to reconcile the woman they thought they knew with the one escorted into a police car under the flash of cameras. The yellow house on Pine Street, once a symbol of warmth and care, became a place of uneasy curiosity. Strangers slowed their cars as they passed, staring at the drawn curtains and darkened porch where Clara had once begged for help. Inside the courthouse, the atmosphere was heavy with tension. Prosecutors laid out their case in clear, methodical steps: the late-night drive, the packed suitcase, the unplugged camera, and the false name used to rent the cabin. Each piece of evidence chipped away at the picture of a frightened mother and replaced it with a portrait of deliberate planning. Clara sat quietly through most of the proceedings, her expression unreadable. At times, she appeared almost serene, as though she still believed her actions had been justified. Lila, too young to fully grasp the storm around her, remained at the center of every decision. Child welfare specialists arranged for her to stay with her grandparents while the legal process unfolded. They reported that she seemed cheerful and largely unaffected on the surface, though she occasionally asked when she would see her mother again. To protect her, officials limited contact to supervised visits, during which Clara tried to maintain an air of calm, reading stories and asking about school as though nothing extraordinary had happened. Each visit ended with quiet tears once Lila left the room, but Clara rarely showed emotion in public. The trial drew reporters from across the state, turning Maplewood into a place where television vans parked alongside family sedans. Legal experts debated whether Clara's actions stemmed from mental illness, misplaced fear, or calculated selfishness. Some argued that her devotion to Lila, however twisted, showed she believed she was acting out of love. Others pointed to the careful steps she took renting the cabin in cash, disconnecting the camera as evidence of cold, deliberate intent. When the verdict finally arrived, the courtroom sat in near silence. Clara was found guilty of child abduction and interfering with a custody agreement. The judge acknowledged the absence of physical harm but emphasized the psychological damage and the danger posed by such a carefully planned disappearance. Clara was sentenced to several years in a state correctional facility with the possibility of early release only if she underwent counseling and proved stable. Life in Maplewood slowly returned to its gentle rhythm, but the story lingered like a shadow. Parents locked their doors earlier. Neighbors exchanged knowing glances, and children who once roamed freely were now kept a little closer. The yellow house remained, its porch swaying softly in the breeze, a silent reminder that danger does not always arrive with a stranger's face. Sometimes it hides behind a familiar smile, waiting for the moment no one expects.